Uh, wow, that takes me back. That legitimately takes me back. Oh, that's good. Hi there, friends. Oh, to be clear, this is not alcohol. This is root beer, but like, it might look like that in case anybody was just tuning in the past few seconds. I am not. I'm not gonna be slamming beer today. A weird nostalgia trip. Oh God, it's like that scene from Rick and Morty. It's literally bottled nostalgia. First one is a story from today. First one is a story out of Cleveland, interestingly. Okay, this story was written by Jake Zuckerman. It is currently up on cleveland.com. I'll post the URL when I upload this on YouTube. Late nights and strange bedfellows. Why Ohio Democrats joined conservative Republicans to kill a gun control policy. Columbus, Ohio. It was almost 3 a.m., with hours remaining on the last working day of the year, and Ohio lawmakers were getting cranky. The lame duck legislative session, the period after Election Day, but before new lawmakers assumed office in January, is traditionally among the most productive and chaotic stretches of the 2-year cycle. Not much. I was having a giant nostalgia trip, and we're just starting to read the first article. The lame duck, despite a rule in the state constitution limiting bills to a single subject, ideas with next to nothing in common are routinely mashed into single bills and passed at light speed. Democrats, who control just 35 of 99 seats, had just come off an unexpected win. They banded together with some of the chamber's most ardent social conservatives to kill a package that combined stripping power from the state school board, a ban on transgender athletes playing women's sports, and a ban on schools mandating COVID-19 vaccines. Not much later, Rep. Kyle Kohler, a Springfield Republican, moved to amend another bill that reclassified penalties for animal abuse. His amendments had nothing to do with pets. Rather, it stiffened penalties for convicted felons who later were found guilty of unlawfully possessing a weapon more than once. Democrats have pushed relentlessly into no avail for policies that would reduce surging rates of gun violence in Ohio. But at the finale of a 2-year legislative session where a Republican-dominated legislature dramatically rolled back gun restrictions in Ohio, Democrats went on to join with a swath of the more conservative wing of the Republican caucus to kill the amendment. So, late hours, Ohio is scrambling, and it's good to, I don't know, it feels like a little late-minute victory. Like, it feels like a nice little W to come in, kind of, sneaking in at the end of the year. We need as many of those as we can get. And, like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Democrats are usually good or decent people, but Republicans are, like, frequently comfortable with the folks fucking killing us. So, like, there isn't a better choice at the moment. And having Democrats not push gun controls or even fighting to kill it is always just to, like, I wish some of you must be partially getting it. The episode captured the underbelly of lame duck politics. Late nights, strange bedfellows, shortened tempers, and policy making on a dwindling shot clock. This came up at 3 a.m., said Representative Thomas West, a Democrat who lamented a lame duck Republican outreach or time for meaningful analysis of the idea. From a Republican Party that's loosening all the gun laws and constantly messaging for more guns. Current state law prohibits people under a disability, fugitives, people who are convicted or accused of a violent felony or others from possessing a weapon. Kohler's amendment, in broad terms, would lengthen the penalties and broaden the presumption of prison time for previously convicted violent offenders who are then convicted of possessing a weapon while under the disability for a second time. A third weapon under disability conviction would yield a 3 or 10-year sentence. I think this is one that it's really easy to write this as scary. It's really easy to write this as like, oh well, clearly they're literally focusing on people who have convictions. The number of people I know who like don't know the exact rules around whether or not they can handle firearms, which ones they can, which ones they can't, what's considered a firearm, whether or not past crimes still count, whether or not something from 2 or 4 decades ago matters, whether or not something has been expunged or not. The world is fucking weird and wild. I don't think it's reasonable for anybody to say something like this would automatically only apply to like dangerous criminals, because someone who just doesn't understand the law the second time around was essentially have like no life left. They're talking about like putting in a giant penalty, which prisons fuck up people in this country. That's unfortunately their function. That's interesting. The label is now like coming up. I gotta remove this, but yeah, this is straight up like the meme of the Rick and Morty thing where it's like bottle your innocent childhood, bottle it with simple armor. Yeah, that straight up just tastes like my childhood, like the good bits of my childhood. It is a very specific taste. Okay. I think it's time to realize when a person will no longer follow the law, listen to anything we write on paper. There's no new law we can write, Kohler said in an interview. We can only stiffen the penalty. Wait. So the big brain thunk on this dumb motherfucker is we can't write new laws, but we can write new penalties, which are new laws. Like, if you can't write laws that will scare this person off, the penalty doesn't fucking matter. So stiffening the penalty is not going to change shit. Like, the idea surfaced after a 2019 mass shooting in Dayton where a 24-year-old man with no criminal history opened fire at a bar with a rifle he lawfully purchased online. Again, no criminal history. Legally purchased. This is, like, the problem is there's no solution for the problems that they are pushing that isn't eventually going to get to, well, let's just stop letting people buy guns. And the thing is, that's what they mean by reasonable gun control. The idea of reasonable gun control is frequently presented as this like neutral middle ground. The thing is, the arguments that I have had with folks who are like genuinely involved in manipulating policy on gun control have made me come to understand this is not something that is a reasonable argument. It's not being presented in good faith. Yeah, the thing is, reasonable gun control is always, it's not ever presented as a decent faith thing. I think people often don't realize how easy it is to present arguments in different faiths. I really want Thank You for Smoking to become required watching for the American pop. Because even stuff like this, it seems reasonable. The problem is when it doesn't work, they're going to come for something else. Every time, every step. The end goal is never find where the reasonable point is. Because this is not the source of the problem. The idea that you can meaningfully own the means of self-defense, but at the same time not give people access to mental health care, not give people access to proper education so that when they hear fucking outrageous lies, they aren't looped into it. Start including media analysis in education again. I don't understand why this is even a thing anymore. But I think a lot of that comes from a massive pile of privilege where I learned when I was in school. We would read articles and like analyze, well, what perspective are they coming from? What is the journalist trying to put across here? What specifically did they not put? Did they phrase something that's incredibly inflammatory? What's the original source? Do they have a reason to lie? They're not fucking doing that. They're not teaching that. If they are, people are just choosing to ignore the lessons. But frankly, given how abysmal our education system is, I would not be surprised if it's just people don't know. Yeah, exactly. The problem is they don't want to analyze the actual problems. They don't want to analyze the fact that this hate doesn't exist in a fucking vacuum. Checking sources. Social media has also really been terrible about this because it absolutely encourages people to share things without reading and processing the article first. Eggs, fucking excuse me? Like, we should be reading this stuff. And I'd love to say I've never done that. I have absolutely, the times where I catch myself doing that, I force myself to go back, read it, and make sure it is sharing what I am trying to share. But I get how fucking easy it is. Like, part of this is straight up, I think the world needs to get back to understanding that the web fucking sucks at being honest. The web is a painting. The internet is a series of paintings that we are all sharing with each other. Even this news article is a very, very nice painting. It's a painting that includes an ad for Cricket Wireless, apparently, but it's a painting. It's not something you should guarantee is 100% truthful. A series of tubes. A series of art tubes. It is art tube. No, the tubes are paint. The tubes are just spraying paint. He killed 9 people and wounded 17 others. It was one of 2 mass shootings to rock the nation over a single weekend. Since then, mass shootings have grown increasingly common, and 2021 was the record year for gun deaths in Ohio since 2000, according to the available health department data. I understand quarantine in some circumstances, but the lack of resources that people got to survive through that, combined with the number of jobs that were just openly cut with no recourse, combined with what was supposed to be $1,200 a fucking month being whittled down to $1,200 once. Like, they decided to make the weakest and most in need of defense absorb the pain of a pandemic, and you wonder why that pain is resulting in people breaking. Like, it's not something that you'll be able to fix with, even if you go for hard bans. We now live in an era where people can just make their own shit. Like, FGC 9 exists. WTF Mod 9 exists. Hoffman's getting really close to making, from my understanding, first 9mm indirect blowback, because it's just easier to make the internals function with homemade shit. But, like, they're getting really close to stuff, even like 5.56 options. I never thought we would see a printed upper. I legitimately thought that would be like one of the hard limits. Getting an AR upper to handle the forces involved in recoil for a 5.56. Uber Eats and a Verizon, the two genders. Amazing. A gamer Papa John's. Ew. The other two genders. Oh God, no. Is everything being the two genders going to become just this channel thing? I have a feeling that's going to be the next. All right. Gov. Mike DeWine, a Republican, proposed the idea within a limited gun control package that included the enhanced gun penalties but avoided mainstay gun policies like universal background checks or red flag laws. Oh, so the person writing this is already complaining that they, like, the limited package didn't include some of the really fancy shit. Yeah, red flag laws are fucking terrible. Like, the idea that anybody can place a call and have the government disarm people is scary as fuck in an age of, like, open fucking genocide. On the penalties provision, DeWine cites a report from an Ohio State criminal justice researcher who analyzed 36 years of state criminal convictions. The reports find that a small group of violent offenders commits a disproportionate amount of crimes. However, Deanna Wilkinson, who authored the report, said her research made no policy recommendations and doesn't evaluate the effects of enhanced gun penalties. It has nothing to do with the research. That's not a recommendation the data would have suggested. DeWine's administration stands by the idea. Andy Wilson, the soon-to-be director of the Ohio Department of Public Safety, said in an interview that the policy targets this small group of serial violent offenders. Like, violent offenders is where you get into a really big fucking problem here. Because you're talking about people who just broke laws while they had guns in their possession. That could be literally anything. And if you get an aggressive prosecutor, they can pull shit out of their ass that becomes something. God, the pepperoni sounds like such a euphemism. He noted it leaves judges with discretion to ease sentences and doesn't apply the enhanced penalties to people who are prohibited from carrying weapons due to drug violations or dependence. It specifically exempts the group that you're trying to pretend like that's the problem here. Even though, like, no, it's a wide problem. But unfortunately, most gun control, it is worth knowing, is presented in the worst. It is very rare that this stuff is pushed because they have everybody's interest at heart. It can in some cases. It's also worth knowing that everybody is the hero in their own story. So in a lot of cases, it comes from straight up not knowing or being so privileged that you can't understand a lot of the impacts or conceptualize them as real world things. You get a lot of people where the concept of fighting is that's a theoretical. That's not a thing they ever have to engage with in a serious manner. And that ends up resulting in some really fucking terrible ideas coming around the idea of how do we defend ourselves. It's why there is so much fucking bad self-defense advice. Like, some genuinely terrible takes. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like every single thing I've ever said is instantly perfect. But I think there are some people where fighting to them is such an abstract that they can't understand what possible damage they're talking about. Shotguns end up being a big area of this for me. The number of myths that I have heard and have to, like, dissuade in, like, casual conversations when it comes to shotguns, it's interesting. So there's the worst example is the pump to scare. Yes, leaving a gun, what's called cruiser ready, does make sense in a number of cases, especially if you have either family or um, just generally live in an area where, like, the fact that you're going to have something like a shotgun somewhat readily accessible, means you probably don't want to have one in the chamber just in case. Um, I think that said, there is this giant myth that you can scare a bad guy by like walking up and doing the pumping noise. Um, there are a number of recorded instances. One of people panicking, fucking up that first pump, and sitting there with an open gun while the person they were about to shoot shoots back. Um, I heard about that, and that is some of the most base law choices I have ever seen a state like start veering towards. That is wonderful and amazing on multiple levels. If you are going to use a shotgun for home defense, and it's a complicated question of whether or not you even really should. Um, I don't think they're terrible, but I think they are. There's some situations where they work really well, and some situations where I'd probably argue there's better options. Um, if you're going to use one, though, um, the first sound an intruder should hear is either an instruction from you or a shot. If you are going to. Wait, this is Ohio? Let's go into this story. Screw it. All right. This is a story from The Week. I'll have the link again in the YouTube when this goes out. The Indiana law that lets citizens shoot cops. The Hoosier state now allows people to use deadly force to keep public servants from illegally entering their homes or cars. Police, of course, are not pleased. Oh, this is January 8th, 2015. Fuck it. We'll do it anyway. Police officers in Indiana are speaking out against a new law that gives citizens the right to use deadly force to protect themselves against a public servant who oversteps his authority. Tim Downs, president of the Internal State Fraternal Order of Police, says the law, signed in March by Governor Mitch Daniels, but only now getting national attention, might give people the impression that they can shoot police with impunity. It's just a recipe for disaster, he tells Bloomberg. Here, a brief guide of this controversial legislation. What exactly does this law say? Oh, this is fucking gorgeous. It authorizes people to protect themselves or their property by using deadly force in response to, quote, unlawful intrusion by, quote, a public servant. The measure is essentially just a public servant specific amendment to the state's 2006 so-called Castle Doctrine bill, which allows people to do whatever they have to do to stop someone from illegally entering a home or car. Indiana is reportedly the first state to specifically allow the use of force against police. Jesus Christ. Damn, you looking mighty fine there, Indiana. Oh. The new rule was passed with a nudge from the National Rifle Association. Did the NRA do something based? Did the NRA not suck for once? There's multiple layers to this story. I think they are just so fervently 2A that they're also kind of. It is both MAGA and Russian space to be getting ready for the coming war, unfortunately. Yeah, the world is fucking wild, y'all. The state Supreme Court has previously ruled that citizens had no legal right to resist police officers, even in a case of unlawful entry. So before this new law was passed, explains Republican Senator Michael Young, people had no legal right to protect themselves from abuse at the hands of authorities. Indeed, he says, a homeowner could do nothing in the hypothetical case in which he returned home to find a police officer raping his wife, other than filing a lawsuit later. Michael Young, are you actually based? What the actual fuck here? Like, yeah, that is. I do love that Michael Young isn't even the Michael Young that comes up if you Google Michael Young. Ballotpedia. Let's see Michael Young. Yeah, fuck you, buddy. See, this is why I am talking about why it's so easy to link queer bashing with gun rights. Like, on the one hand, you have, like, this is the same person who is like, yeah, you should be able to, if cops are attacking you, you should be able to fight back. Also thinks that trans women are men, trans men are women, and regardless of your hormones, your school athletics have to be in line with your birth certificate, which, go fuck yourself, buddy. Not according to law enforcement officials. Yeah, I don't give a fuck if cops don't think that you don't need to worry about them. Yeah, constitutional carry is fucking based. New Hampshire has that, and yeah, good. Fucking great. Email shows CDC removed defensive gun use stats after gun control advocates pressured officials in private meeting. The Center for Disease Control deleted a reference to a study it commissioned after a group of gun control advocates complained it made passing new restrictions more difficult. The lobbying campaign spanned months and culminated with the private meeting between CDC officials and 3 advocates last summer, a collection of emails obtained by the Reload show. Introductions from the White House and Senator Dick Durbin's office helped the advocates reach top officials at the agency after their initial attempt to reach out went unanswered. The advocates focused their complaints on the CDC description of its review studies that estimated defensive gun use happens between 60,000 and 2.5 million times per year in the U.S. attacking criminologist Gary Kleck's work establishing the top end of the range. That 2.5 million number needs to be killed, buried, dug up, killed again, and buried again. Mark Bryant, one of the attendees, wrote to CDC officials after their meeting. It is highly misleading, is used out of context, and I honestly believe it has zero value, even as outlier point in honest DGU discussions. Like, it's not an outlier because you disagree with it. It was used in the study, in the review study, because it was considered valid data. The CDC looked at it. The CDC made a goddamn decision, and we're like, yeah, we're going to include that. Gun control activists, again, who don't care about truth, they care about removing guns. They have no fucking problem openly lying, including going to the CDC and having the CDC lie for them. They had them remove legitimate data. Bryant, who runs the gun violence archive, argued Kleck's estimate had been damaging to the political prospects of passing new gun restrictions and should be eliminated from the CDC's website. And while that very small study by Gary, 25,000 people was the initial study, with an additional like 42,000, it's like 67,000 responses. Fuck you that it's very small. Has been debunked repeatedly by everyone from all sides of the issue. It still remains canon by gun rights folks and their supporting politicians, and it uses a blunt instrument against gun safety regulations every time there's a state or federal level hearing. No, he repeated it with 250,000 people and got closer to 1.7 million. Which, okay, you're a bit off there. The data did shift a bit there when you had a much larger population. You still were not, like, wildly off the fucking mark here. And the idea that even that number shows, like, the idea that we could restrict guns and save a few lives, and we can just ignore all the times where they're used. Fend lives. Like, it's borderline fucking evil. It's telling people who are actively fighting for their lives, you matter less than common order. Despite initially standing behind the description in the defense gun use section of its Fast Facts website on gun violence, the CDC backtracked after a previously undisclosed virtual meeting with the advocates on September 15th, 2021. We are planning to update the fact sheet in early 2022 after the release of some new data, Beth Reimels, Associate Director for Policy Partnership and Strategic Communications at the CDC Prevention, said in one email to the 3 advocates on December 10th. We will also make some edits to the content we discussed that I think will address the concerns you and other partners have raised. Like, we don't like this. It makes banning guns harder. Can you please stop sharing the information? It is so fucking insidious. The CDC did not respond to a request for comment on the decision, but none of the emails the agency released related to it did not show any attempt to obtain other outside points of view, either before or after the meeting, with gun control advocates. Hannah Bristol of the White House Office of Public Engagement did not respond to a request for comment on her role in the discussions beyond what the email was revealed. Emily Hampston, Senator Durbin's communication director, told The Reload their office's only involvement was, quote, simply connecting organizations with the federal agency as part of the function of their work. Fuck off. The decision to remove a CDC-commissioned report from the agency's website on gun statistics at the apparent behest of gun control advocates may further strain its relationship with congressional overseers, especially pro-gun Republicans, who are set to take control of the House next year. The relationship between the two, already frayed over the coronavirus pandemic, could reach new lows not seen in decades. During the 1990s, Congress put restrictions on CDC funding in response to officials openly working with gun control groups to try and ban handguns. We need to revolutionize the way we look at guns, like we did it with cigarettes, Mark Rosenberg, director of the CDC's Center for National Injury Prevention, told the Washington Post in 1994. It used to be smoking was glamour, symbol, cool, sexy, and macho. Now it is dirty, deadly, and banned. They don't hide their fucking intentions. There's no subtlety here. It is straight up, we are coming for your gun, constantly and consistently. Kleck, professor emeritus at the Florida State University College of Criminology and Criminal Justice, stood by his research. He said the CDC did not reach out to him for his perspective before making the change. He argued the removal of the reference to his estimate was, quote, blatant censorship, and said it was evidence of the politicization of the agency. The CDC is just aligning itself with gun control advocacy groups, like Kleck told the Reload. It's just saying, we are their tool and we will do their bidding. And that's not what a government agency should do. They aren't banned, but you can see they are straight up trying to use the CDC to make arguments that, like, it will be for people's health to ban guns. And no, it fucking won't. There'll be surface level numbers where for a year you'll be able to point to reduced suicide rate, very short term. They'll ignore the spike in suicide rate that happens afterward. And like when it returns to normal, they'll be like, oh, that's just the world being what it is. And when it spikes back up, it'll start getting worse. But yeah, GVA uses the most conservative criteria for what constitutes a defensive gun use. Instead of attempting to... The website change and the fact that it resulted from a lobbying campaign were first reported by The Trace earlier this year. The publication identified Bryant's involvement in that of Devin Hughes, who runs GVpedia. The new emails revealed through a Freedom of Information Act request filed by Constantinos Moros, a lawyer representing the California Rifle and Pistol Association, showed the nature of that lobbying and the involvement of the Newton Action Alliance chairwoman Poe Murray. Bryant and GVA have gained notoriety for its count of mass shootings that use a much broader definition, with any shooting where 4 or more victims are injured, compared to the Associated Press definition of 4 or more killed. The difference in methodology results in a near tenfold difference in the number of identified mass shootings. GVA's count, alongside its near real-time tracking of shootings through media reports, have been widely cited by media outlets since it was launched in 2013. Conversely, GVA used the most conservative criteria for what constitutes a defensive gun use. Instead of attempting to capture any time a person legally uses a gun to defend themselves or others, it only counts incidents that make it into media reports or police reports, though it's unclear how many police reports they have access to. The site's methodology takes a strikingly dismissive tone towards any other potential defensive gun uses. Our policies do not take into account stories not reported. I can't believe this happened to me scenarios or extrapolations from surveys, the methodology reads. Our position is that if an incident is significant enough that a responsible gun owner fears for their life and determines a need to threaten lethal force, it is significant enough to report to police so law enforcement can stop the perpetrator from harming someone else. Fuck you, no it's not. The amount of fucking privilege it takes to say, oh, if you had to use your gun, you could definitely go talk to the cops comfortably about having to do it. Like, you have to be, like, a high level of white, cis, hetero, and privilege to be sitting here and be like, oh, yeah, if you defend yourself with a gun, you would go tell the cops. No, the fuck we wouldn't in a lot of cases. Like, if I'm not shooting, I'm not telling anybody. If somebody is, approaches me with a knife and I pull a gun straight up to make somebody run, that's just a thing that happened in the universe that I now get to live down and think about. I'm not telling the fucking cops. The chance of the cops arresting me or not believing me or straight up turning me into a suspect and doing enough searching that they will find a way to charge me with some bullshit. No, I'm not going to the cops unless I shoot. Sorry, that's not fucking happening. I'm pretending like that's inherently it is straight up so much privilege that you think fighting is something those people do. These are the people who the reason they're fine with exempting cops from all of their gun control measures is it's not that they're anti-gun, it's they think the help should handle the guns, and they're confused why you're handling it yourself. When GVA's stated goal is to provide, quote, unbiased, unfiltered data on gun violence in America, Bryant described a different motivation at lobbying the CDC to remove the link to its own paper on defensive gun uses. Until proof, if available, we in the GVP community respectfully request that the outlier that has been used so often to stop legislation be removed until a panel can build a fair survey which will better reflect the true status of the number of defensive gun uses, he told the CDC in his follow-up email after the meeting. So they don't think it's a problem, but because they're the people who actually did the data, they now want to do their own survey. Like, people who are pro-gun control are going to control the survey and make the number whatever the fuck they want. Fuck you, no. GVPedia's website says its mission is to provide ready access to academic research and high-quality data on gun violence. But Hughes and his organization also equates gun ownership with smoking and drunk driving. Further, it endorses and advocates for legislation aimed at restricting gun ownership broadly. They also share controversial political messages on the organization's Twitter, including a recent cartoon accusing the NRA and Republicans of reveling in a bloody massacre. When Bryant and Hughes have produced gun violence research, Poe Murray is a more traditional activist. Despite the CDC telling the Trace that it only heard from, quote, a few members of the gun research community who expressed concern about the original fact sheet content, Murray was the one who facilitated the entire conversation through her contacts in the White House and Senator Durbin's office. Murray and Newton Action Alliance are among the most bombastic members of the gun control activist space. They commonly attack anyone opposed to bans on AR-15s or other forms of firearms as supporters of mass shooting. At various points, they have accused everyone from congressional Republicans to Senate Democrats to Disney to even a father who lost his daughter in the Parkland shooting of supporting the murder of children or wanting to arm killers. Jesus fucking Christ. Imagine not caring about human lives so much that you literally tell the father who lost a child to a mass shooting that the fact that they do not support gun control means they supported the death of their own child. Like, that's straight up immorality. That is straight up evil. That is legitimately evil. I'm going to give this guy a follow. He deserves it. And you all should go follow this guy. He definitely deserves it. R. Petty. Yeah, gun control straight up exists to oppress minorities. That's not even like a misnomer or a meme. That is straight up just facts. Gun control exists to oppress minorities. That is the reason gun control fucking exists. That is the only reason. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for the news. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I really fucking appreciate it. Yeah. See y'all soon.